At one point I was literally driving to Formby to tell Jurgen that this wasn't going to happen. It's just one of those days where you just pinch yourself. I was probably ready to go, and that wouldn't have been good. Having gone all around the world with the club, I know that what we deliver at Liverpool Football Club, and as often that is voiced by the people who come there, who often feel privileged to come to Anfield and get their asses kicked. Privileged.
Can you just take us back to your first time meeting Jurgen? I believe it was just before that Tottenham game, his first game, and what were your first impressions of him?
Well, I had been brought over by, interestingly, Billy Hogan in those days, who at that time was the chief commercial officer. I was not working for the club, but I was well known to the club. I was chief operating officer of EA, Electronic Arts, and had got very involved in my days as president of EA Sports and the FIFA game formerly known as FIFA, and Billy had got to know me, and I got involved. I bought 2 boardroom seats when the new main stand was being built, which was a little rash of me for somebody who lived 5,000 miles away. But and Billy asked me to come to London and chair a partners meeting, and it just happened to be, and Ian Ayre was still in place as the CEO of the club, and it just happened to be the day that Jurgen was announced and showed up, where we were playing Spurs the next day at White Hart Lane, and got to meet Jurgen that night. And you know, funnily, at that moment anyway, it was, the team was decimated, and our only forward we had, which I always remember, was Divock Origi. And I'm not sure Jurgen knew a ton about Divock at that time, but in classic Jurgen fashion, he says, we'll make everything work. It was a dour draw the next day at White Hart Lane. But straight away, you know, you get this feeling of, look, self-confidence, a man that knows his craft, very comfortable working a large room of sponsors, even though, you know, he was day one on the job, and a big personality that really commanded the room when he spoke, and was very willing to shake hands with every single one of us and have a photograph. So you immediately, I think, understood then this was somebody different. No disrespect to a Brendan Rodgers or Roy Hodgson, but this was somebody different. And of course, as Liverpool fans, we were all well aware of him in his days at Dortmund, and his name had been mooted for a little while here, so it was great to finally meet him. He was, you know, straight away being dragged upstairs to meet a number of the commercial sponsors for the club, but smart enough to understand how important that was, and taking the time to do that in the hotel, which I think we were somewhere maybe in Canary Wharf or something like that. So he fully understood the importance of these people that were up there, because he does have that holistic view of what it takes for a football club to be successful.
The biggest sale in Liverpool Football Club's history, with Philippe Coutinho departing for Barcelona. Talk to us about, I mean, obviously Coutinho is widely spoken about as being the best transfer because it, you know, allowed us to bring in Alisson and Virgil. Your role as chief executive, do you know anything that's going on there before that transfer
Not
happens?
really. This is very much in the role of what we call football. You know, my job as chief exec was to run the business of football off the pitch, and the team that would be managing that, Michael Edwards and his team, were doing that brilliantly. You know, you're aware of the players' discontent, I guess, and eagerness, and look, you know, football is all about agents in the background and some of the dark forces that you know, have a vested interest in moving players around. And Philippe, as you remember, the little magician, was playing phenomenally well for us. But in the end, you know, he moved, and as everybody knows, I think that, you know, we got a very good price for him from Barcelona, and as a good business does, it reinvests those assets into the future. And what we did was able to, you know, go out and buy the world's best defender and the world's best goalkeeper as a result of that. And kudos to the team that was behind that.
When was the first time that you heard that Coutinho was leaving? And did you hear, like, is it literally just through the media and Twitter and everything, like the same as any other regular fan?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you know, for me, look, a football club is like any business. You know, there's got to be very clear lines of demarcation, swim lanes, responsibilities, accountabilities. And when I came to the club, I've never been in football in my life before, and here I am as the CEO of the world's biggest football club in my estimation. But I was very clear we had a lot to do, and what happens a lot in companies, corporations, football clubs, if everything gets confused and roles and responsibilities get confused, then you get a little bit of organizational paralysis where nobody's quite clear on what they're doing. I was very clear on what I needed to do. I was very clear on what I needed to do. And look, I didn't, it was when the club was going through a very different phase of what it had been before. My predecessor certainly got involved in that stuff, but my job was described as a svelte or a skinny CEO, which is very clear lines of demarcation. And then we were growing the sporting director role, which, in English football was a relatively new. So in the end, I focused my efforts on what I look back on and now call the 4 C's. Civic, very much focused on community, the commercial side of the business, and then building culture, both locally and globally, and certainly for the 800 employees that work for Liverpool Football Club that don't kick a ball. So the 4 C's is where I landed as my job started to coalesce around things off the pitch, which was important. And we had, as you know, a world-class sporting team, sporting director, recruitment, loans, scouts, physios, medical, nutrition, all of that. And my job was to not have them worry about a darn thing other than winning football matches.
You spoke there a little bit about the sporting director role, so it's probably a good time to speak about Michael Edwards, obviously the person that is primarily, given the credit for the sale of Philippe and the other transfers that transformed Liverpool in that sort of 12-month period. Did you have any dealings with Michael Edwards on any ever or day to day, or just? Yeah,
we didn't see each other day to day. Look, I was in Chapel Street. He's in Melwood. We would meet at Anfield, and if there were issues, particularly during COVID, we had a lot to do with each other because what was known as Project Restart required a tremendous amount of input from the football side of business into the business side of football, and so from that element of it, yes, Michael and I in that final year worked a lot together and had to go back into Michael, Pep, even Jurgen, what's happening with the players, how are we going to get back, what are the protocols we have to adhere to, what does a behind closed doors game look like, and so in that final year of my tenure, we had a lot to do, but day to day, no. I mean, I would see him and Dave Fallows and Barry Hunter, Dr. Ian Graham, Julian, the crowd at games, and enjoyed being at games with them. But day to day, I would rarely go to Melwood, and they very rarely would come to Chapel Street. We just knew our roles.
Michael is a little bit like John, I guess, where he's got a very low profile, he works in the background, which I think is a very good way to work in this sort of situation. What's he like as a person? Do you have a feeling?
Yeah, Michael will tell you that he's a deep analytical person. He kind of got going at Portsmouth with this idea of data. And look, I grew up in football, playing in the 70s and whatever. Scouting was like grizzled old guys going to Stoke on a Tuesday night with a notepad and looking at a kid playing, and it has evolved immensely, and a little bit of influence from America with Moneyball and what's known as sabermetrics and American sports, which are more akin to being analyzed because there are more metrics, particularly in baseball. And Michael will tell you that he's very focused on that and anything else, and like I will always call him a genius, they've got these blinkers on of this is what my job is and this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it at a world-class level, and anything else is a distraction. And so he's very focused on that, and I'm delighted, particularly with Jurgen now leaving, I'm delighted that when you have such disruption, the more you can bring back the structure of how things were, the better off the club will be.
You mentioned the word culture in your 4 C's, and bringing Michael back, it almost seems like we're retaining that culture going forward. What's your thoughts on sort of the role that he's going to take on? Obviously, it's a more encompassing role and not just specific to Liverpool.
Well, I don't think it's very clear to any of us what it actually means. You know, he obviously in the FSG announcement, it was not a Liverpool Football Club announcement. He's reporting into FSG, which gives him a broader role from the Boston-based enterprise, and they've, I think, very clear that they're looking for acquiring other clubs and looking very seriously, which we didn't do in the old days, at multi-club ownership, to be able to have a greater global footprint, maybe a greater pipeline for talent outside of just Kirby and the academy. And you know, we've seen that to the credit of clubs like Manchester City. This multi-club ownership through the CFG, the City Football Group, seems to have paid dividends here. And you know, FSG has already a very strong portfolio, and I think it's important to make this point, that within that you've got the Boston Red Sox, you know, one of the most valuable and powerful brands in American sports that goes back over 100, 120 years or so. You've got the Pittsburgh Penguins, the NHL team. You've got New England Sports Network, which is the cable network that carries this. So you've got this verticalization of the sports experience. But the reason I bring this up, you've got people like Theo Epstein, who's kind of the Michael Edwards of the Boston Red Sox and was one of these first wonder kids that used data. That, if you recall Moneyball, you probably saw the movie with Billy Beane. It was, you know, Brad Pitt playing Billy Beane. Billy Beane, who I actually know pretty well, was the general manager of the Oakland Athletics, and a small market team that used data to find value in players so that they compete with the New York Yankees and the Boston Red Sox. And I think that FSG can not only be a great support for Michael and his team, but also this broader element of how they're using data as this multi-billion-dollar sports enterprise will allow Liverpool to have a little bit of a leg up maybe on other clubs that don't have the benefit of that.
So Billy Beane, Michael Edwards, you know both these characters. Do they share some similarities?
Not really. You know, Billy more recently got involved with football. I think he's still a little part owner of Barnsley or something. Their fascination with football and how he can use his experience and his eye for talent through data and maybe disrupt football in that respect. I think, you know, Michael's very football oriented. I don't think he's got a baseball head on his shoulders. But my overall point here is when the overall sum of the parts here of FSG can be a very powerful force to help Liverpool Football Club on a global basis identify talent, identify value, as we've always done and Michael's proven he can do, and use some of the you know, the expertise that somebody like a Theo Epstein, who was able to do this for the Boston Red Sox. And they're very similar to us, where we hadn't won the Premier League in 30 years. Red Sox hadn't won the World Series in 84 years. And you have this kind of wonder kid come through as the GM that pushed data as the way to look at players and talent. And I happen to be, you know, an avid Red Sox fan. And when I first moved to America, I realized I just need to learn baseball so I can understand American culture. So it was wonderful to see the Red Sox finally deliver for their fans.
It's interesting because people speak about the Moneyball, and obviously it got criticised very early on when FSG came in, and maybe that's media and misconception from supporters. But I was saying recently that arguably Wataru Endo is the ultimate Moneyball transfer. You know, talk about an undervalued asset that nobody else is looking at, and he comes in and he, you know, performs the way he does. So.
Well, and this is it, and you certainly see it in American sports, but because the constant trading and drafts and what have you, and if it doesn't work out, psh, gone. But Endo, you're exactly right. Look, it's identifying an undervalued asset, knowing that the raw material is there that can be molded on the training pitches in Kirby, knowing the quality and characteristics of the player. And his personality, his intelligence level, his football intelligence, and Jurgen, Pep, and the team saying we can work with this, you know. And look, none of us, we may have heard of Endo, but none of us really knew about this. And there was a bit of a head scratch when it happened. And look, there's been a few instances in the past few seasons where we've tried to sign players that seemed like bargains that didn't quite work out. Endo has proven to be a machine.
Madrid, the final. how confident were you? What was the feeling around the club internally? Because obviously the fans were pretty confident, but internally, what did you feel? Did you sense going into that?
I mean, I can only speak for me as a fan, but getting a feel for the lead up, and also having lived through Kiev, you know, you knew it was coming back with a vengeance the following year. I felt really good going into Madrid. A lot of work was, again, the team behind the scenes done a lot of work we knew how many fans, unlike Kiev, were going to be there without tickets. What do we do? Work with the Madrid authorities, the police, get them in an environment where they could have a great deal of fun. We would bring over Jamie Webster and sort that out. Our team, our tourism team, Tom Cassidy, would make sure that we had an environment where the fans could have fun. Most didn't have a ticket. Go find the bars, the restaurants, the taverns in Madrid, watch the game. And then, you know, from what I remember, I don't remember any arrests or any trouble whatsoever in Madrid. And we could have had as many as 50,000 fans there without tickets, because it's not a difficult place to get to.
You spoke about the pre-match with Jamie Webster and everything, and we've seen like videos of Virgil watching it back, and apparently some of the players watched those scenes on the bus going to the stadium. Was you there to watch it? Was you on the stage? Yeah. So what was that like, watching that and thinking, we are, you know, however many hundreds of miles away from Liverpool, and yet this is like a gig with 20, 30,000, because the locals were just like in awe of what was happening in front of them?
Yeah, I think, you know, and I do use that as an example. I do leadership presentations. I do some work for FIFA in their management faculty stuff where I become a guest speaker, and I talk to fellow budding executives about fan engagement, how to manage a global fan base, how to manage fans in an environment with safety but fun as the priorities here. And I will show people a video, Americans for example, I say, look at this. And then I say, this is not in Liverpool, this is in Madrid. The great majority of those people have traveled, do not have tickets. They're there for the experience. And this is where your team and the sport will transcend winning and losing. The one thing we would say as Liverpool fans, we've had, even Kiev, they come back, we had a great time. Did it work out for us on the pitch? But no. Shevchenko Park, we had a great time, and it was difficult to get there, but that journey is part of the experience.
We finally win that European Cup for the 6th time. What was the after party like?
It was wonderful. I mean, and when I say it was wonderful, sometimes clubs will have their players and their families separate to the broader fan bases and the sponsors and the families of the employees that are not part of football. That was not the case. If I recall, we were in the Eurostar Hotel. We'd already pre-booked, as you have to do, kind of the lower ballroom, which was massive. And we got back, the cup was there. I was very fortunate to have my kids with me and my wife, and we just partied all the way through. By about 4:30 in the morning, somebody said, you know what, we've got to catch a plane at 7 because we've got to get back. And then you're back in operational mode, because then it's very much, we got a parade. We pre-planned the parade, and from the perspective of my operational head goes on then, we've got to get everybody to somewhere down in Mather Avenue off there in South Liverpool, get the buses going here. And so we got to go upstairs. I don't think we went to bed, shower, get to the airport, get everybody back, and then get to Melwood. We're issued Champions of Europe shirts, and then get on the bus and shake hands with the Lord Mayor and the dignitaries as we get on the bus. And, you know, not knowing that ultimately 750,000 people were going to be on the streets of Liverpool, you know, and ownership who'd not been through this before. I'm corralling, and I'm with John Henry on the bus, and you know, it's just one of those days where you just pinch yourself. I'm just a lad from Garston that you know, his dad had a pub on Scotty Road type thing, and went to my first game in 1959. Here I am, stood James Milner, Andy Robertson, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, Virgil van Dijk, holding the, well, I'll still call it the European Cup out, to show hundreds of thousands of people. And it was just a wonderful day. I don't think I've told this story before. I was downstairs with John. We're explaining that we're on a hybrid electric bus that needed to go a little faster to power itself. And I think the story has been told. You know, there was plenty of beer on the bus, as it was evident to everybody here. The toilets on the bus started to overflow. And then we were bailing out the toilets into the drains every 200 yards just to keep everything moving and sanitary and hygienic. But I do remember, you know, John was fascinated, and John was intent and loving it, but they needed ultimately to get back to the airport. And so, and I'm on with my team, and we get to the bottom of kind of Scotty Road to go up Leeds Road, to go over the hill, to come down onto the Strand. And John is used to the Red Sox parades, which last for about 90 minutes on what's called duck boats, which you remember those in Liverpool. I think one sank, but and they last about 90 minutes, and they're fun, and it's a great, because they go down the River Charles in Boston. So John said, you know, well, we should probably jump out here and get the car here. And I'm going, John, there's 250,000 people still. He couldn't believe that there was still that many people, because we've been going for 3 hours. And I think he thought he'd said hello to everybody that lived in Liverpool by that point. And I said, John, no, wait till you see what's on the Strand, on the Dock Road. And they were just blown away, you know. So it was, I think, an experience when you've committed financial resources to a football club you didn't know much about, and then you have that experience. I think it all comes together for you there, and I was very happy for John.
And what about Jurgen? You know, did you manage to get a few photos with Jurgen? And what about, you know, we always hear these stories about Jurgen giving rousing speeches and dancing on the dance floor with the players. Jurgen
was on the back of the bus. I was towards the front, and my only concern was that he was going to fall off the bus. That was the only concern I had, because he kept straddling the thing, and I just didn't need him falling off the bus. Obviously he didn't, but yeah, no, the bus was pretty packed. I was there. I felt a little out of place for me. It was, I mean, I was unbelievably excited to be there, but it felt, I don't belong here. But I certainly wasn't getting off. But it was one of those, and the moment that encompassed it for me, and you may have seen a picture of this. I have a picture of my dad on my phone, who's been gone a long time, but he imbued the love of Liverpool Football Club into me. And I was able to get my dad on my phone, and my assistant Tina was with me, and I said, take a picture of my dad with everything in front of us here. And I still have that photo of my dad and hundreds of thousands of Liverpool fans, and being able to say to him, you wouldn't believe what's happening here.
Yeah, so that's a nice moment. Just kind of feel something personal for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what about in the party? Was Jurgen throwing some shapes there the night before in Madrid? Because we always see these odd little clips. And we
yeah, look, I mean,
there
is a release you have when that you've given so much to something, and then it comes true. And so you have that release, and you know, Jurgen doesn't drink, you know, during the week. He'd always tell you, but when there's the opportunity, as there was that night, to celebrate with these young men that had given so much, and to be there and to have his family there, it is very much, it was great to see. Now look, there was hundreds of us downstairs, and it was a great few hours. The players were mingling. There was no us and them whatsoever. I always remember Shaqiri, you know, just running around and you know, with a scarf around his head, and just having a great time. And it was good to see that the players felt comfortable in the environment. Nobody was going to be taking pictures and that would be embarrassing. And look, there was nothing to be embarrassed about down there. But we had a phenomenal time. The players rightly had the ability to celebrate. They'd given so much that year. And, you know, it was fun for me to see them and their families all come together. And Jurgen, of course, being the ringleader, as he often is. But it was just good, clean fun.
We'll fast forward then to the next party, which happened under very different circumstances, having won the league, and you know, the sort of the situation around that. You know, your role, like you spoke earlier about the sort of business and football sides were more closely having to work together. What was the planning around the trophy presentation, and how many sleepless nights did you have thinking up ideas?
Well, I'll take this opportunity to acknowledge Sky Sports. I did a phenomenal job under the most extenuating of circumstances. Look, there was nobody allowed in the stadium, and it was, obviously we were playing Chelsea. We knew what was going to happen, and you know, the arrangements have been done for kind of a made-for-TV event, very different than what normally happens with Premier League trophy presentations, but from the perspective of everything coming together. But again, it was not a fun day for me, because it was very much, there was a plan that we believed as a football club that we had the green light to bring family members in to enjoy this moment with the coaching staff and the players. That morning, all of that seemed to have gone sideways, with a misunderstanding, if I recall, of what level 3 protocols were. And all of a sudden, my entire day was spent working, trying to get all the way up to 10 Downing Street, but certainly working with DCMS, the Premier League, a gentleman called Bill Bush in particular, a Liverpool City Council, and in particular Tony Reeves, who was the CEO at the time, going above and beyond. We weren't going to get a safety certificate that day without adhering to protocols. Plans were put in place at one point to have the families sit outside in buses and watch the game and then celebrate with the families. We had a breakthrough at about 4 o'clock, back into with both the Premier League and, more importantly, the local city council, police, to get a safety certificate that would allow us to have the families out of view, but in the stadium, watching the game, and then to be able to celebrate with players and coaching staff afterwards. That was a very difficult day, and at one point I was literally driving to Formby to tell Jurgen that this wasn't going to happen, and like I say, at about 4 o'clock we had a breakthrough with, in particular, I do remember Tony Reeves being on vacation and helping me enormously convince the folks on the safety committee to grant a safety certificate with certain protocols in mind, but to allow families to come in there. And that was a rough day for me. And in the end, it was a magnificent evening. And one of my favorite pictures, which I'll probably take in my coffin with me, is me, Kenny, and Rushy, the only 3 people there, sneaking a glass of champagne as the trophy's being presented. Kenny had just presented the trophy to Jordan Henderson, but it was one of those moments where you just go, you knew we'd won, and then go back, and I watched it all back again, as I often would do after a game, because I couldn't sleep, but I would go watch the game again, and then watch everything that happened with Sky Sports. I use what Sky did with Jamie Webster, my city, and I use that in America as how content at a particular moment in time can really show the passion, bring together actually various facets of the city that is not football, in this case music, somebody that's grown up like Jamie, who we're so proud of, and we think we had a little bit to play in his career acceleration through the football club. And how Sky Sports embraced that. If you remember that video, which literally put tears in my eyes, because it was very much about more than football, but what it meant to the people of this city, and the characters in there that I knew. There was flashes and vignettes of characters that I knew. And I will show that video in the United States to show how powerful content evokes emotions in sport.
If only the lockdown had held on for 2 more match days, we'd have had our hands on that trophy in front of fans, I believe. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, I got a call from Richard Masters, who I have the greatest respect for, and I've known Richard for a long time. In my days at EA, Richard was running marketing and licensing, and was a tremendous partner as part of our Premier League deal at EA Sports in the game formerly known as FIFA, and said, look, if you beat Everton and then beat Crystal Palace the following week, would you accept a Premier League trophy? Because Richard, are worried that we won't get much past that, and we may not get to there. But if we do, it would be great to be able to present the trophy at Anfield. And obviously, yes, of course we never got there, but that was the plan. And then, of course, last real football game played in England was Atletico Madrid visiting Anfield, and all of the controversy surrounding that, with the city of Madrid having gone into lockdown just 24 hours before, but where we had, and UEFA says you're playing this game, and here we have 3,200 Madrid fans in the city of Liverpool, and that was challenging for us. And then I think the next day or the day after, I think it was Mikel Arteta or something, test positive, and for some reason that became the inflection point, and Premier League is suspended.
You recently said that you got the news of Jurgen leaving at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
That's the time zone there. But you went through like the 12 stages of grief when you heard that he was leaving. Have you got any personal favourite moment, any personal interaction with Jurgen that you'll really take and sort of put as your firm memory?
Yeah, I mean, I would see Jurgen every match day. We would travel on the plane, and he was always very gregariously fun until he would sit in his seat. I would be in, my wife would often come with us 1A, 1B, Jurgen's in 1D, leave 1C alone. Matt McCann would pop up there, Pep might pop up there, but Jurgen would listen to podcasts and kind of get in the zone, and you'd never wanted to bother him then when we're traveling. Coming back, as often as not, we'd win on away games, and it was a fun plane ride back from wherever we were, and we'd chat. But for me, some of those, first time I really sat down with him was having a couple of pints with him in the pub in Formby. He needed to get to know me and what I was all about, and his wife Ula, and Pete Crowitz was there, and he always felt comfortable there, because let's not forget, he can't stray too far. You can't wander around the city here and go have a beer somewhere or go have dinner. It just isn't going to work for him. So it's a very different life that he had to leave and has to leave. But for me, it was always seeing the joy in his face. I was never looking forward to get on a plane when we got beaten, which was very rare. But then you just okay, leave everybody alone. Like you can imagine, there's reflection that goes on when you get beaten, but sometimes many times those things are turning points for the club. And one of the things that I do remember, we go to Wembley to play Spurs, and we get whooped. I mean, and Dejan Lovren gets pulled, if I remember, way before halftime. Harry Kane was a nightmare. And then if you recall, after that, we went on this streak. And that was one of those moments, I think, that Jurgen used that as, whether it's honey or vinegar, but as here's a lesson, and we're not gonna experience this again. I remember being on the plane ride home. I also remember a lesson I learned that night, which I never did again, which is got off the plane, and I was still early in my tenure, still in temporary housing in the city, and walking back to my apartment, and foolishly walked through the city, which I never did again, and got jumped by not a couple of guys, like 5 guys on Castle Street, and punched, and I think that was October in my first year. I'm trying to think, but and then I learned my lesson. Look, you just don't go out at night. Don't go out at night, particularly when you lose. But winning or losing, I would never, particularly being with my wife, expose my wife to that. There's too much goes wrong. It doesn't matter how well you're playing. You're still a suit. You're still corporate. And
that was because you were who you are.
Yeah, a guy recognized me and called me soft lad, and just and to be fair, I was with my assistant at the time, Zara, and as often as when a woman's involved, she has a better chance of breaking stuff up, because I was probably ready to go, and that wouldn't have been good for me, for the club. I was walking right up Castle Street where Gino De Campo's used to be towards the town hall, and just came up from behind, grabbed me, and he had been overserved, you know, and it was 8 o'clock at night, you know. But I was in my club suit, club tie, and so lesson learned. I never went out again, and typically I lived on the Wirral, and I would stay out there. Just too many bad things can happen. People just, you know, have too many bevies, and that's what happens. So,
Jurgen, well, you know, you've worked in business for a long time in multiple high-performing, elite, world-renowned businesses. What have you learned from Jurgen that you've taken into business? Because he's a leader, not just specific to football.
Jurgen, and I've said this a number of times, regardless of the industry, the business, Jurgen could be a high-performing corporate, publicly traded CEO. The skill sets required are leadership, intellectual capability, empathy, understanding the product, understanding the customer product, and in this case, if you will, being football, the customer being the fan, understanding your employees, the players, getting the best out of them, managing a large organization on a global basis, achieving targets, goals, objectives, setting a strategy. Those are all the core things that Jurgen Klopp does brilliantly. Those are all the core responsibilities and requirements of being a successful CEO. And he could absolutely be, and I've worked with many of them. I've been a CEO. I've worked for Microsoft Electronic Arts, full-on multi-billion-dollar operations in a C-level. I've seen less skilled people in senior positions making a lot of money than Jurgen Klopp. And I know he knows that. Obviously, he loves football, and there's no reason for him to do elsewhere. But you know, he could certainly work in any industry that requires those core skill sets.
If there was one game that you could go back to during Jurgen's time and watch it again from the stands, what would it be?
Well, I was always watching it from the stands.
You can go back now and watch it again from the stands.
Watch it again, obviously Barcelona. And Barcelona for me, you know, we went there. They were incredibly hospitable. I loved going there. Bartomeu was the CEO at that time, was very gracious. I got to meet Michael Robinson at that game, who said, would you consider coming back to Spain to sit down with me one-on-one at the World Football Summit to talk about Liverpool Football Club. Michael played for Liverpool, Man City, a wonderful guy with a great story, and I wasn't aware of it until I'd got to Barcelona, that he had ended up his career in Spain and learned Spanish and became what Spaniards will tell me is the leading pundit on Spanish television, talking about the game, La Liga, the clubs, in a very volatile environment as Spanish football can be. And I had dinner with him and his son Liam, and Michael was ill then and sadly has passed away. But one of my favorite memories coming, and we'll get back to Barcelona in a second, but coming back to that was meeting Michael, then flying to, I think it was Madrid for the World Football Summit, and sitting down, the two of us, talking about the club, but at an emotional level, about what the club means. And I'm often ridiculed. I talked about Shankly and what would Shankly do, and people scoff at that, but I still think in those terms about what this football club's all about. But back to your question, yeah, Barcelona. And you know, what happens on game day, Champions League, is when it's at home, my job at that time as the CEO is to welcome the visiting executives. We take them to a very formal lunch called a protocol lunch. The UEFA delegate comes, I make a presentation, I make a speech. We do it at Art School. I don't know whether the club still does it, but Art School and Paul Askew, phenomenal restaurant here in Liverpool that absolutely deserves a Michelin star. I would bring Paul into the room and explain what, you know, he would source things locally. And we talk about, here you are in the Georgian Quarter, here you are in this magnificent historic city. I know you know us through football, but let me tell you about Liverpool. So we do that. I remember going to Barcelona, and I remember us playing well, but still managing to lose 3-0. And And if you recall, if they scored 1, we needed to score 5. It was still in the days where away goals meant something. And I will never forget Bartomeu in his speech saying, "I'm worried about tonight." And I'm going, "Sure, you're worried about tonight. You need to score 1. We need to score 5. We don't have Mo, you know, and it is very much going to be the Divock Origi show or whatever it happened to be." You know, and I in my heart, look, you always think there's a chance, and you go through it as a fan. We get an early goal. Anfield gets behind it, you know, they'll start to crumble a little bit, you know, you're doing that visualization, and of course that's what happened, but I didn't believe, but that night was unbelievable. What I will take away, again, in this hallowed position I have sat right there in the front of the director's box, is the crushing despondency looking 2 feet to my left of the Barcelona executives who'd lived through this the previous season with Roma. If you recall, a very similar winning position and then falling apart. But Bartomeu, the classy guy that he was and is, came to me, gave me a hug. He said, "Now go on and win it." You know, and those are moments that you don't forget. Look, I remember the goals and everything, but those are the moments you don't forget. And as often is the case, the amount of adrenaline you, as an executive, have to, you know, have and give that night. I had to go back and watch the game again on television till 2 a.m. just to see it in a different perspective, hear the commentary, see things that I didn't see there, but I'm not 100% focused because I'm aware of everything that has to go on around, managing the boardroom. What I used to do as a CEO, which was unusual, is actually get on a microphone in the boardroom and welcome the visiting executives, any celebrities or important people we had, legends would come in there, and that was kind of an important part of what I believed was my job as CEO of Liverpool, was to welcome people to our great city, to our great club, into our wonderful boardroom for what is always a top-class experience. Not always the case around the world when you go into boardrooms is a top-class experience, and I won't talk about anything in specific, but having gone all around the world with the club, I know that what we deliver at Liverpool Football Club, and as often that is voiced by the people who come there, who often feel privileged to come to Anfield and get their asses kicked. Privileged.